Hello, YouTube. Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge. I'm back. I'm back after 2 weeks. I wouldn't say tanned, but fit and rested anyway. Certainly doing much better than had been last time we met on a Monday night or whatever it was. And really appreciate the 2 weeks off. Thanks very much for being so understanding. Got a lot of elastic back in my step, so that's just really cool. Over in our YouTube stream, our friend Atomic Conqueror and a couple of other people, who I suspect has another name over here, on Twitch, but nevertheless is talking about the fact that we've got actual nuclear reactors coming back online. And I'm thinking, man, this future thing's actually starting to happen. It's actually starting to happen. So that's great. This is the future. The immediate future is going to be determined by how many nuclear power plants we can build. And oops, let me just modify that just a wee tiny bit. Do it. Yeah, that's good enough. So yeah, thanks everybody for the kind words. Yeah, I was definitely getting I was just about out of steam on last Monday, and then we opened up the show after all this racing to get all this stuff ready to show, and then the microphone volume for some unbelievable reason was just down in the toilet. I was like, I can't take it anymore. So anyway, yeah, not a lot really new to talk about. I did see, I guess it's more of a Monday night topic, but I'll just drop it here. I did see, because it's the only thing that really comes to mind in the last couple days that I just really remembered on. But I saw a documentary on Ren and Stimpy, which I just loved. Just loved that show. Thought it was great, especially the first season. And saw a documentary called Happy Happy Joy Joy. It was a story of Ren and Stimpy, which was the story of John Crickfalusi and Spumco Studios. And what a tragic, I mean, when I say a tragic arc, I mean like a traditionally Greek tragedy. This guy's got this overbearing father. They don't come out and say so, but it's pretty clear from the interviews and from some of Crickfalusi's drawings that he probably got paddled a lot. And so it's about this guy, and he always believed in his dream, and he takes it to the network, and the network likes some of it. They like these two characters, so they do Ren and Stimpy. And then he grabs the greatest artists in the country, who were, Hanna-Barbera animation at the time, and He-Man and Masters of the Universe, and it was just so mechanical and lifeless and dull. And I remember the first time I saw Ren and Stimpy, I just lost my mind. I saw the one where they're firemen, and that woman is dropping these big heavy things down for them to catch, and then save my elephant, save my piano, save me, and then she's coming down and her butt's going flop, 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 flop. I just thought I was going to have a brain hemorrhage. I laughed so hard. And so they had like a year, this group of people. There's a picture of him outside of Spumco Studios. I don't know if it was in the Valley, but I do know that Crickfalusi's house was, I don't know if he's still, I rather doubt he's still there, but his apartment was, 1/10 of a mile from me, or 2/10 of a mile. And I was watching these Ren and Stimpys, and I loved them. Space Madness is insanely funny. I just remember just watching the show with just tears in my eyes, almost exclusively because of Ren, and the voice acting was so over the top, and the animation was so over the top, and Crickfalusi for the first year did the voice of Ren, and that scene in Space Madness where he's in this tub and then the ship goes to 0 G, and he's clutching his soap bar, and he's talking about it being like creamy ice cream, and he's taking these big bites out of it, and he's completely paranoid, and he turns to him and he says, "Why can't they leave me alone?" And I just crying when he engaged. I don't know if it's Space Madness was one where, because I think that it's two space ones, There's one where Stimpy engages like the full drive, and they just do this G-load thing. And I loved it. I loved it. Loved it. Loved it. Loved it. I loved the show when there was a contest where Stimpy was entering a slogan or a sing-along slogan for a cereal or something. And Ren is saying, I know you got no chance to win. And then finally the prize award shows up, and Stimpy's not there. And Ren answers the door, and the guy says, well, I've got $1 million prize from whatever the hell the company was. And Stimpy starts trying to pretend like I'm the cat! I'm the cat! It was great. I loved it. I loved it. I loved its log, yeah. I loved all of it. And so they had this year to about 18 months of just artistic paradise on Earth, where Crick Falusi is living his dream. They're changing animation. Everything that happened after Ren and Stimpy, SpongeBob especially, anything after Ren and Stimpy was crazily influenced by Ren and Stimpy. So this one golden season, and then in the second season, the first show was late. No, the first show was on time. The second show was so late they had to rerun the first show for the second season, second episode spot, and Nickelodeon got more and more angry. And there's so much blame to go around here. Nickelodeon told them, everybody loves the show. They made $4 billion on merchandise. It's billion with a B. And they wanted more, and Crick Falusi was kind of perfectionist that makes me just look like, I don't know. I almost had a clever Shakira or some kind of joke like that. But in any event, so the pressure between Nickelodeon and Crick Falusi gets bigger and bigger, and then he gets obsessed with this second season episode called Stimpy's Invention, which is probably probably their best episode. It's Stimpy invents a hat that Ren has to wear to make him happy all the time, and it was like Fantasia for the studio. They had to get every single drawing right, and Crick Falusi just tearing this stuff up, saying, no, you gotta. And his attitude was, here's the storyboard, and whoever gets the thing next, I guess it would be like the chief animator, he's got to improve on the storyboard, and the color guy would have to improve on the chief animator, and just had to get better and better and better and better as it went down through this process. And Crick Falusi's under so much pressure, and was by all accounts not a fun guy to work for, which reminds me quite a bit of Jack Warhammer, actually. Although he had his fun moments, and so did Jack. But all of these animators, and when I say all of them, there are probably 12 of them, know that they're changing the world, and they're rock stars, and people are coming asking for their autographs, and all of this. Well, thank you very much. Scientific Exploration with a $10 super chat says probably better use of my money than Starbucks. Thank you very much. Appreciate it very much. Anyway, as the studio keeps demanding stuff, Crick Falusi gets more and more unstable. He pretty much had a nervous breakdown. He was kind of in the same mode I was in last Monday times 100. He just couldn't keep up with the pressure. He was sleeping 2-3 hours a night and trying to get this perfect product out there. Now, on his own side, Crick Falusi had a product that had changed society. I mean, it had completely revamped the animation industry, had taken the cultural world by storm. Everybody was watching the shows. Everybody's quoting the shows. They were getting ratings that had never been seen for cartoons before. All of this stuff, and so Nickelodeon just keeps asking for more and more. It is online. I saw it online. I saw it on YouTube. It's called Happy Happy Joy Joy. It's free on YouTube, and so finally, they got these notes coming in, and the network says you can't do this and you can't do that, and once the network said to, not just to Crick Falusi, because these guys were rebels, they were They were not company guys, none of them. They could have all been animators for Hanna-Barbera or anything. He just went out and found the best artists he could find. So gets to the point where Nickelodeon is saying, you're missing so many deadlines, you're going so far over budget here, you really need to get into this. This is how we do television. We can't do television when you feel like delivering a product. And they were giving him these notes, and he thought these notes were nuts. I'm feeling great, Quebo. Thanks for asking. And finally, Kricfalusi sends a memo to Nickelodeon exec and says, we're no longer doing network notes, and the shows will be delivered when they're ready. And Nickelodeon says, well, we just can't run a business that way. We have schedules, and we have timetables, and we have affiliates, and we can't do a second season where the second episode of the second season is a rerun of the first episode of the second season. We can't just keep doing that. So Kricfalusi throws the gauntlet down, and they fire him from his own show. The guy who was his co-director took over. Some of the animators went with him. Some of the animators went with Bob Camp, who was the co-director of the first season and in the second season. And finally, Kricfalusi just leaves, and probably 2/3 of the guys just left once Kricfalusi left. Hang on a second. Hey, Jenny, I'm on the air. I'm going to have to call you back, okay? Okay. All right. Yeah, it wasn't Natasha this time, but it was a business call I need to take. So he disappears. The show gets kind of flat. The guy who voiced Ren went on to Billy West, who's a really talented voice guy. Billy West voices a lot of the characters on Futurama. And so you could tell the second season episodes were not up to the same standards as the first season. And then the show gets canceled, and because nobody can work on it anymore, and it just had such a short run. So then Kricfalusi basically loses his mind in the same way that I think anybody who had their life stream taken away from them loses their mind. I don't think you survive that. I don't think, well, you survive it, but you don't, you certainly don't survive it unscathed. So he becomes a recluse. Then there's this girl that's like 14 or something, and she's writing him and telling him how he's changed her life, and she just wants to be an animator and all this other stuff. And she comes in as an intern, and she's sending kind of suggestive texts, and he's sending suggestive texts back. He's like he's in his 30s, she's like 14, 15. And then one thing leads to another, and so on. And then, the story, they're together for like 5 years, and then the story breaks, and then the young woman says that he completely ruined her life, and she has nightmares about him, and all this other stuff. And so Kricfalusi gets Me Too'd out of existence, and I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking, man, there's a lot of this that is familiar in terms of like the Michael Jackson story, and we did that episode not too long ago when the Michael movie came out about whether or not these kind of childhood traumas that produce genius, are they worth it or not? And it's like, the conclusion we kind of came to was, no, it's not. The ones that walk away from a malus kind of thing. Would you inflict that on a kid to make a genius? No, I would not. I would not inflict psychological torture and physical abuse on a kid to make him a genius. and give the world things like Ren and Stimpy or Michael Jackson's music, or you can make the case for a lot of these people. But at the same time, it seems to be so closely intertwined that it's hard to. If you were to take all of the people, Lady Hawk says Mozart's papa wasn't a nice guy either. No, that's exactly right, Lady Hawk. Mozart's papa was pretty much Joseph Jackson. So, what do you do? I mean, not that you can do anything. I'm just talking about it from a moral point of view. If Mozart had a nice father, he probably would not have been remembered. He would have maybe been remembered as a musician, or maybe something, but he certainly wouldn't have been Mozart, and Michael Jackson wouldn't have been Michael Jackson, and John Kricfalusi wouldn't have been Kricfalusi, and all of this stuff. Eric Blake says, thank God a lot of geniuses have shown up throughout history that, as far as we know, had a fine childhood. Yes, but, Winston Churchill's childhood was appalling, absolutely appalling. He was sent away at an early age. His mom was just a complete skank, really. Slept with everybody. His father contracted syphilis as a childhood prank from a couple of his buddies who dragged him drunk into a prostitute's room. So his dad died of syphilis, and even when his dad was, they shipped young Winston off to boarding school early, which was a kind of a standard for the aristocracy in those days. But his dad wouldn't even visit him when he came to that town, and all of these people. There's a really good obviously most people know about Amadeus, but there's a really good biopic about Beethoven called Immortal Beloved, which is really just very, very good. And he had it, just, it was Gary Oldman. And I think it was his father who boxed Beethoven's ears so badly that he became deaf, So what do you do about that? Woody Fool says Prince Charles, now King Charles, was a victim of an overwrought dad's expectations. It's really unfortunate, and at the same time, it just seems to be so integral. And I'm watching this thing, and I'm thinking, I know that Kricfalusi should not have been having this relationship with this girl who was 15 or 16 when she came, but I also know she was writing him all these letters, and she was initiating kind of these, double entendres. I'm not blaming the victim here. She's a little girl, and she doesn't know what she's doing. I get that, and Kricfalusi's taking full responsibility for it, and his life is his Greta's life is over. But I'm just thinking, when I saw the same pattern with Michael Jackson, and Michael Jackson did some freaking horrible things. You can just so easily see how these guys are just desperately trying to live a part of their life that they never got. They just didn't get it. It never happened to them in that timeline. So I don't know. No, Prince Philip died before Elizabeth did P7. Not long before, but about a year, maybe less, something like that. So once again, it's that giant, question about what makes real genius. And he knew what he wanted to do from the beginning. And his dad said, Kricfalusi's dad, who apparently was the inspiration for all of these vein pop, was certainly the inspiration for Ren, and this kind of vein popping kind of thing. his dad, when John was young and he was drawing, he said, "I want to be a cartoonist." And his dad said, "Look, you go to Hollywood, kid, 1 in a million. 1 in a million makes it in Hollywood. You really think you're going to be the 1 in a million?" And Crick Lucy said, "Yeah, I do, actually." So it was just, thank you, Quibo, and I've got a lot of those coming up on Monday, I hope, by Monday. You don't want dysfunctional kids, but that dysfunction, when you have it, look, there are, needless to say, for every John Kricfalusi or Michael Jackson or Robin Williams was the same way with his mom. He couldn't get his mom's attention. Robin Williams became Robin Williams, doing all of these voices and characters because that was the only way he could get his mom to pay any attention to him at all. Otherwise, he just didn't exist. It had to be Robin Williams plus. He had to come in with some new act, something new, and it's a hellish pressure on a child. And I'm not in the same boat as Kricfalusi or Michael Jackson by any means, because I didn't suffer anything like the kind of trauma that they did. But there certainly was enough certainly enough of a parental deficit in my life that I can understand them and connect to them. And Natasha is the same way too, who also had a lot of just really, really traumatic things happen to her as a young girl before she grew up and I met her obviously. And we just talked to each other about this, and it's like this is apparently what it costs, So I don't know. I don't know. I know I'm happy that Ren and Stimpy is here, and I felt very, very sorry for John Kricfalusi. Even though he was a complete dick to work with, apparently. And I'm not. I'm fun to work with. Except when we were editing the Cold War, and when we were editing the Cold War, the first 2 episodes were just so great, and then they got a YouTube editor. And my definition of a YouTube editor is somebody who essentially is working with emojis, and what I mean by that is a YouTube editor is somebody where the script might say, in 1939, Germany, Hitler did a Rush political campaign, or 1933, Germany rather, did a Rush political campaign where he traveled all around Germany in a special airplane. He was the first politician to use airplanes and stuff. And then a YouTube editor will put in a shot of a 707. And his justification will be, well, it's an old style airplane. What else do you need? You talk about Hitler, I put in a picture. You talk about an airplane, here's an airplane. And when I got one of those editors and I started seeing what they were sending me, I started off just very nice, like, guys, this is wrong, 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 and we got to get these things right. It's a history series. It's not it's not science fiction. It's got to be correct. And I had lines where I was talking about, soldiers in going through the jungle in Vietnam in 1966, and this guy had put in like World War I Germans going down through a trench, in black and white in World War I, and I got more and more and more angry until finally I just started just saying, are you trolling me now? What this, do I have to edit this myself? I cannot release this. And I got pretty heated, but in my defense, it took weeks of this. And they say, oh, we'll find another editor. And it's like, dude, I would even have to send them the pictures, I'd have to, like, here's Hitler's airplane, please use this, here's this, it's like, no, it's no good. So there's all kinds of things mixed up there. But that movie has stayed with me for 2 or 3 days now. Um, Happy, happy, joy, joy, and at least he got a chance to have a year and a half um, of exactly what he wanted. He was doing his he was doing his show the way he wanted to. He had a hand-picked staff. Everybody loved coming in. Everybody lived there. Everybody loved everybody else. Everybody was joking. Just to have had that experience in your life is, you know, not many people get that experience. And all of the things that happened to him afterwards, which he is responsible for, and I'm making no defense for. But I think those things came as a result of a guy who had just been. It's not being fired. That being fired is something any adult should be able to deal with. But to have your child taken from you and then ushered onto the stage with somebody else as its dad, that's got to be hard. I know Jeremy must have gone through that with Daily Wire. He built that company. And I don't know how you survive that. Same thing with Steve Jobs and any other number of people who've built this incredible thing and then had it taken away from them. So my only legal requirement for the colonies and what I will do and not do to get it produced is I will never, ever, ever give up less than 51%. I'm sorry. I will never give up more than 49% of the company. Steve Jobs, right? James O'Keefe with Project Veritas, there's another one, right? Or if Charlie Kirk had been displaced from head of TPUSA for some reason other than not being killed, the person is the product, and you just can't do that. They did it to Roddenberry, but by the time they did it to Roddenberry, I don't know, right? I think, and I obviously never liked Next Generation, and I think by the time it was, I later found out that it was Roddenberry who insisted on Wesley Crusher, because Roddenberry saw that as kind of he identified with the boy genius thing, and the show got a lot better after Roddenberry left that, but still, I don't know, hard to say. But anyway, that's what I've been thinking about. And then as far as my time over the last 2 weeks, aside from trying to keep the ball rolling and everything else moving, I have been putting enormous amounts of work into finishing this rover, which may not sound like a big deal, but this vehicle is this. Everything that happens on the planet happens with this vehicle in the background. It's got to be right. And I've got a very, 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 very good rover now. I've got sensors on it, and I've got the decals on it, and it's ready to go. So I'm now actually turning out actual frames, and I have the first 3 shots in Cast 27 laid in with music, and the music looks good, and the shots look great. So it's 3 shots long, but it's looking good, and I'm going to be working on that a lot during the weekend. So, there you go. All right, so anyway, that's what I've been kind of up to, and just sort of an introduction. So let's see. Oh, something absolutely major that I completely forgot to mention. I had been, I've been doing the Stress Free Lounge show for 14 years now or something like that. Oh, wait a minute, 12? Something like general ballpark. And I'd had pretty good internet service here. I'd have 700 megabytes down and anywhere between like 27 and 40 megabytes up. But every night, which now is more like every other night, or 4 nights a week or something. 2012, thanks Dave. So 14 years of doing Stress Free Lounge. And so there's that, which is an upload speed thing, and then every night I have to post a a right angle, it's about an hour and a half to 2 hour process. It doesn't take too long to edit and output it, but I have to upload it. It's usually a gigabyte plus file. I have to upload it to YouTube, have to upload it to Rumble, have to upload it to Meta, and I have to upload it to X. And these uploads take about 25 minutes each. So I just sit here, usually at 12:30 in the morning, waiting for these uploads. And I just finally said, what is the matter with me? So Quibo says I need an AI agent, and I'm going to do that. Scott told me that Claude can do that, so I'm going to look into that. But I did get fiber optic installed. It was a 9-hour install for them to get fiber into this room from the street. It was a 9-hour install. But now I've got 8,000, well, let's find out just for the fun of it. Anyway, I went from 25, 30 to 35 megabytes up during the stream, and now we are going a little bit faster than that, so you should not ever see hiccuping on my end again, ever. Ever. Let's see what these numbers are. Whoops, I'm on the Wi-Fi. Dummy. I haven't had the Wi-Fi upgraded yet. Let's turn that off. Let's run the internet speed check, shall we? No, that's not the internet speed test I want. I want the Ookla. All right, here we go. Ready? And they're off. Download. I was getting about 600 to 700 before. Here comes the number. 912 megabytes per second. Upload. This is the one that counts. Woof. 915 megabytes per second. It's a gigabyte per second upload. So now, when I upload the right angles at the end of the day, I just upload them and they're done, and they're done, and they're done. It's just how fast can I copy and paste? And as people have pointed out, there are agents that can do that now, so pretty soon it's going to be like, yes, I just finished the editing. I type in field 1, field 2, field 3, and it's done, and that will be just great. And that frees up a lot of my time and a lot of tedious time, so that'll be cool too. Yes, atomic batteries to power turbines to speed, and watching that thing go is amazing. And the modem looks like an egg looks like Eve from Wall-E. It's just this white, soft, kind of highly diffuse plastic egg. And it's got the time on it, and it says 6:58 in very blocky old kind of digital things. It's a very strange thing. But those numbers are woof. And when I think about how much time, the number of hours I wasted waiting for these things to upload, and I mean honestly, every night I'd upload a YouTube thing, it would be an hour where I would essentially have nothing to do, just except watch the upload thing to go. So I'm very happy about that. That's really helped quite a bit. All right, let's see what we got for our questions here. Come on, baby. There we go. Is it sight? Where am I on? Members. Wait. Member forum. TSL questions for 625. Curated by Marisha Dark. Thank you very much. So let's see what we got. We got a Marisha Dark. We've got an Eric Blake. We've got a Ray Juarez. We've got a Road Runner. And that's it. Short night. Okay. Since it's a short night, Story Monster with the $5 super chat says, "Hey Bill, how did you know Natasha was the one?" Well, I had dated pretty much everybody in Los Angeles by the time I discovered her online by her photography. And when we started talking on WhatsApp, I just really liked her. She was just so feminine, very smart, very talented, and I decided to meet her in New York, so I flew to JFK. I could have flown her direct to LAX, but it was the final couple of weeks of Les Miserables on Broadway, which I'd seen once and was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen ever. So decided to meet her in New York, and so we spent a couple nights in New York. But her flight was delayed by about 2 or 3 hours in a hold over the mid-Atlantic. They took off from Russia, went over the pole, and somewhere over Greenland or somewhere in that general vicinity, the plane went into a holding pattern, and it went into a descending holding pattern because all of the westbound flights from Europe had not gotten, at least from Russia, hadn't gotten clearance to go through Icelandic airspace or something. So they're just circling and circling, getting lower and lower. The pilots, of course, are Russian pilots. They said nothing, told the passengers nothing. So by the time she landed, I had been in JFK for about 4 hours, and I was in customs waiting for her for about 2 hours. And after an hour of waiting for her, I would look, and I'd see somebody come around the corner with blonde hair, and I thought, maybe that's her, maybe it might be her, But the second she stepped out, I knew it was her, and I met her, and we went out to the taxi, got in a taxi, and she just put her head on my shoulders, and I said, "Yeah, I think this is it." And it hasn't been perfect, but it's the best thing I ever did, certainly. Whatever hiccups there are usually pretty much my fault for being I don't know. I feel like I'm disappointing sometimes, I don't do terrible things. I just feel like I'm just, I should be making more money. I should be doing more things. I'm insanely frustrated by how close we've come to being able to get her daughter here after 10 years now. I still can't get her daughter into the United States. And that makes me feel like it makes me feel like a failure is what it makes me feel like. As if I can control the political situation, but most of you guys out there who are husbands or family people, kind of what I'm talking about, and I discovered this very late. I didn't get married till I was 57. But people are depending on you, and when you can't do what I don't think I promised I could get her in here, but I promised I would try my best, and I think sometimes, what could I be doing right now that I'm not doing? And it's a little tough sometimes, so. But yeah, I knew it right away. So first question, Marusha Dark, constitutional muster. Tim Pool has recently been playing this game on a show where he says the Constitution doesn't actually exist in reality, and no one living actually believes in it according to the way the founders originally intended. He cites several examples. Okay. He says freedom of speech doesn't exist because states still had blasphemy laws even up until very recently. Freedom of religion was only ever meant to stop Catholics and Protestants from fighting and was never intended to apply to religions other than Christianity. The Second Amendment doesn't protect the right to bear arms because states can still take your guns away, including when crossing state borders if you don't have a license to carry in both. Habeas corpus doesn't exist because Lincoln suspended it, and we all praise him as the greatest POTUS ever to live. If I hear one more person going off about Abraham Lincoln, I'm going to lose my frickin' mind. Fourth Amendment doesn't exist because police scanners, NSA, and tech companies mass harvesting our data, etc. The one exception he points out is that we amended the Constitution to get rid of slavery, but never updated the others and are just going by our own personal moral interpretation for the rest. I know you think this is obvious nonsense, but you can't explain how and why is wrong. I fear Tim's heavily black-pilling recently, no longer just observing a tend towards civil war, but treading closer towards actively calling for one himself in a pure state of will to power where laws, civility, and principles are all effectively dead. He's far from alone in thinking this, especially with the recent DSA wins in New York. Okay. Well, let's start at the beginning. He says freedom of speech doesn't exist because states still had blasphemy laws even up until very recently. The Constitution was not designed to allow people to go stand in the middle of the town square and scream "fuck you" at the top of their lungs. That was not freedom of speech by any reasonable standard of what reasonable speech was to them. I think if you had told them that that the modern definition of freedom of speech was the ability to go out there and just scream things like that, or create art like Piss Christ or whatever the case may be, I think they would have probably said a people as decadent as that don't deserve this kind of government. The freedom of speech issues and clause were specifically there to protect speech against intrusion by the government, by the federal government. And there are many benefits, overwhelming benefits, to this federalist idea of keeping as little possible power in the federal government and letting states handle pretty much everything else, and then the stuff the states handle goes down to the counties. Then if it's not the business of the states or the United States, then those powers revert to the people. That's the 10th Amendment. So what the Constitution, look, what Tim seems to be doing here, given your examples, I didn't hear him firsthand, so I don't want to be accused of misunderstanding what Tim said because I didn't hear Tim say it. I just heard these synopses. But it sounds like, thank you very much, Jake, for a quick super chat. Howdy, Bill. Hope you had a good night. What are your thoughts on Iran war negotiations? Seem to be awful, ridiculous, frustrating. I'll get to that if I can, Jake. Show's basically dedicated to our members because it's about the only, this and the members only show are the only exclusive benefits to memberships. So if I can come back to that question later, I'd love to do it. But right now I got to get through these. So what Tim seems to be saying is that that the Constitution is this monolithic good, which I believe. I believe the Constitution is a divinely inspired document. I believe it's a product of human beings, the likes of which have never existed before in the same place or since either. I think it's an astonishing document, and I think that I have yet to find an example of where the Constitution was followed to the letter where the Constitution was wrong. Every time I find something that seems to be like, oh, the Constitution got that wrong, it turns out it was somebody's interpretation of the Constitution that got it wrong. But let's go to the freedom of speech blasphemy things. There had been, he says, blasphemy laws existed up until very recently. Those existed in states, did they not? I don't believe that the federal government has ever ruled against blasphemy. I think that's fairly certain of that. Now, if you live in Alabama or if you live in the Deep South or some other religious place, and you determine that blasphemy is against the law, their argument would be, we are not infringing on your right to criticize the government or to exercise your freedom of expression. They were basically putting legal teeth into religious custom, which they kind of are entitled to do under our federalist system, where the states look. Here's the thing with this monolithic constitutional rule of law thing. We are called the United States of America. We're not the United State of America. And that's a very important distinction, that little s. That little s is a big deal. Prior to the Civil War, we would say the United States are prepared to. After the Civil War, we say the United States is prepared to, and we talk about the nation as a nation, and we love the nation, but it is structured as, was structured as, and always was intended to be a collection, a union of states. So the United States of America are bound together by this Constitution that is the law of the land over all of them, but left a lot of latitude for the individual states. So if you want to live in a state that is extremely religious and has laws against blasphemy, as long as they're not violating your right to criticize the Constitution, then the interpretation of the Constitution would be that this is not unconstitutional. In fact, they would probably look at it as just, they would probably, the people that wrote the blasphemy laws wrote them because they figured going out and saying, God is a homosexual is destroying the virtue necessary to keep a society together. They did it to protect a nation of free people. You don't have to agree with that interpretation, but that's certainly what the interpretation would say. And if you're going to say that there's all these little, rules and all these blue laws that they used to have and all these other things, if they're imposed on a local level, that's not a constitutional abrogation. That's not the Constitution failing, and that's not the country failing to respect the Constitution. That's federalism at work. That's the United States deciding on a state-by-state basis what they want to do to interpret that. But there is, in fact, a line that cannot be crossed, and that line is the government cannot censor your speech. And blasphemy laws don't apply to the federal government censoring your speech. And that's all the Constitution deals with. The Constitution is not responsible for what the states do. It's only responsible for what the United States does. And if a state's legislature passes anti-blasphemy laws, then that's the business of the states as far as the Constitution is concerned. That's how it looks to me. That would be my interpretation of it. So I don't see that as a failure of the Constitution. I see that as a function of federalism. And so let's talk about this federalism idea, this idea that the states have so much leeway. Now, some people think this is a really bad idea. I think it's the genius of the United States. The United States, frankly, could not function if it weren't for this. If people don't understand, we've had the Sunday evening news with Walter Cronkite, and we've been talking, we have the United States Navy. We've fought the Germans as the Americans, not as the Californians, and this and this and this and this and this. But America is not one country. America culturally is 7 or 8 different countries. You got the New Englanders, you've got the whole New Yorkers alone. Just New York City alone is its own mini culture. The plantation states on the eastern seacoast are a culture. The Deep South is a culture. The Southwest is a culture. California is its own culture. The Midwest is a culture. The Far West is a culture. The West Coast is a culture. All of these people have very different opinions within a certain set of agreed boundaries. And those agreed boundaries are the Pennsylvania Dutch are another great example. There are Santorini cults in Miami and in South Florida, and it goes on and on and on. So to say that the Constitution is no longer respected or violated because one of these areas wrote anti-blasphemy laws is not the job of the Constitution to write local laws. The Constitution was never designed to write local laws, and if the Constitution was to write local laws that made it a crime to speak acts of blasphemy, then some of these communities that make up the United States would have left. The slavery thing is a perfect example. I didn't know this until I heard Glenn Beck talk about it, but in the original Declaration of Independence, when Thomas Jefferson wrote, he was declaring that we were going to end slavery. And the vote on that to include the abolition of slavery in the Declaration of Independence, not in the Constitution, not in the 13th Amendment, in the Declaration of Independence, Jefferson's draft said that we are going to declare slavery illegal in the United States, and the vote on it among the 13 colonies was 11 in favor of saying, yes, we're getting rid of slavery, and 2 opposed. I want to say it was South Carolina and either Georgia or Virginia, one of those 2. So they had to take it out. And if they hadn't taken it out, we wouldn't have had the United States, and we would have not beaten the British. And nobody knows what would have happened after that point, but we would not have been the country that we became. So that was a compromise that we had to live with for 80 years, I guess, finally. 80 years, something like that. 9 years. Until we finally got that one resolved. And the South still says that war was illegal. The South still says that the United States had no right to come down and enforce membership in the Union at the point of a gun. And that argument has it's got some real validity to it, and so does the counter-argument. The counter-argument is there is no mechanism in the Constitution to get out of the Union. There's a mechanism to get into the Union in terms of territories and so on, but there's no mechanism in the Constitution to get out of the Union, which the supporters of the legal position of the North cite as saying, when you're in, you're in. You don't just get to take your football and go home because things aren't going the way you like it. This is a marriage. It is a marriage until death do us part kind of thing. So that's up for interpretation. My answer to the slavery, I'll get to that in a second. So let me see what else he said here. Freedom of religion was only ever meant to stop Catholics and Protestants from fighting, and was never intended to apply to religions other than Christianity. I'd like to see the source of that. I'll tell you, when Tim Pool says it was never intended to apply to religions other than Christianity, he'd better show me the source of this debate, because that is an assertion. I have not seen any evidence that was voted on or voted against. Freedom of religion means freedom from religion. So if you can have freedom from religion, it kind of, let me look it up. Hang on. I'll tell you who doesn't get the credit for this that he deserves. And many, many years later, he did some not so pleasant things, but Gouverneur Warren, who was in charge of the Committee of Style, who put the actual argument into words, essentially wrote the Constitution. He actually wrote it. He didn't argue it, but when they had voted on something and they'd agreed upon something, they had to give it to the Committee of Style, and Gouverneur Warren is the guy, if I understand correctly, is the guy who wrote We the People of the United States in order to form a more perfect union, blah, 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 and all of this stuff. It's his language. So let's see what we say here. First Amendment to the United States Constitution guarantees 5 fundamental freedoms: freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of peaceable assembly and the right to petition the government. So here's the 5 freedoms explained here. Freedom of religion, prevented by 2 clauses. The Establishment Clause stops the government from creating a national religion or favoring one over the other. The Free Exercise Clause protects an individual's right to practice their faith without government interference. So here's the point I'm trying to make. And this is a really important point, so please listen carefully. Gouverneur Morris and the Committee on Style not only had to get this right legally, in other words, they not only had to word the Constitution in such a way that it was legally clear, they also had to do it in such a way that any farmer who could read would be able to read and understand it. That was the fundamental premise of the Constitution, and the entire premise that our government is based on is that common people can govern themselves, which meant that common people had to be able to read the overarching laws of the land and understand them. And when it comes to this, the Constitution is absolutely precise and has made 0 mistakes. So the Constitution refers to 3, there are 3 entities in the Constitution, and only 3. And you will only hear of 3 different entities in the entirety of the Constitution. You will hear the United States, which refers to the federal government. When you hear the United States shall, or the federal government shall, we're talking about the Washington government that governs the United States of America. So the United States means the nation. The states means the states, and the people mean the people. And if it's not one of those 3 things, then let me rephrase that. Every single possibility is covered by naming one of these 3 parties: the United States, the states, or the people. We understand the difference, right? United States federal government, the states are the state governments, the people are the individual people. So the 10th Amendment essentially says those powers not outlined by the and assigned to the United States divert to the states or to the people. So let's just look at freedom of religion. Let's look at what it says based on which of the 3 parties are being talked about. Are we talking about the people, the federal government, or the states? The Free Exercise Clause protects an individual's right to practice their faith without government interference. The reason I keep coming back to the precision of the Committee on Style is, if this had said what Tim says it would have said, then it would have said the Free Exercise Clause protects an individual's right to practice their Christian faith without government interference. He didn't say that. That's not what it says. It didn't say practice their Christian faith. If the argument is that the freedom of religion thing is just to separate wars between Catholics and Protestants, then they would have said you have the right to practice your Christian faith as you see fit. But it doesn't say that. It says your faith. And so I think his argument falls there. Freedom of speech protects the right to express ideas, opinions, and beliefs without government censorship or retaliation. This includes both spoken words and symbolic actions. Now, when you have a local community that practices or passes an anti-blasphemy law, yes, a state authority is basically telling you can't say this, but the authority that is telling you can't say this is not the United States of America. So it is not a violation of the Constitution, because this has come from a lower level of authority. It's either the state or the local community doing this. And when I say the local community, I remember when I was a kid and I went to Tennessee, and I went from dry counties to wet counties, and I had dinner at a restaurant in a dry county, and I was 13 at the time or something. It was a planetarium trip we took up there to install a show at the what was it? There's a planetarium right in the Tri-Cities area. Eludes me for the moment. But we went into went into a restaurant in a dry county, and what I remember was you couldn't order alcohol, but you could bring your own alcohol. And if you brought your own alcohol, the bottle could not sit on the table, the bottle had to sit on the floor. And I thought, okay, all right, whatever. So there's that. Let's go back to what Tim is saying the whole thing is worthless about. Freedom of religion was only ever meant to stop Catholics and Protestants from fighting and never intended to apply to religions other than Christianity. I think that's simply not true. If they had wanted it to say it only applied to Christianity, then that's what they would have said. All of the rigmarole I just spent the last 10 minutes explaining, there it is. If they'd wanted to say it only applied to Christianity, they would have said it only applied to Christianity. That's not what they said. And they knew what they were doing. The Second Amendment doesn't protect the right to bear arms because states can still take your gun away, including crossing state borders if you don't have a license to carry in both. I think this is probably his strongest case, but I live in the most gun-restricted state in the nation, and prior to my terrible boating accident, I owned an AR-15. So I'm not entirely sure if I see where my right to keep and bear arms is. There's no question it's being infringed upon by the state of California, and I think this is probably the soundest ground he's standing on. But I don't believe, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe there is a state in the union where you are not allowed to buy a gun if you are not a felon. Is there a state in the union where you cannot go out and buy a gun? Yes, they make you do background checks. Yes, they make you do all these other things. You can argue that's an infringement on the right to keep and bear arms. But nevertheless, is there a state in the country, I'm asking seriously, where you cannot buy a gun for yourself? Let's put aside for a moment the fact that you're jumping through hoops. AKA Woody Fool says, in Colorado, you cannot buy a semi-automatic as of 1st of August 26. Wow. Astronerd says Virginia. You cannot buy a gun in Virginia, Astronerd? Look, I'm not defending what states are doing here. I'm not. My concealed carry permit is the Second Amendment of the Constitution. I'm not defending the intrusions that these states are making, and these states are making intrusions on the actual Constitution. So yes, this is absolutely it. But I'm just trying to make the case here that this black pill interpretation of the Constitution, same as Colorado. Can you buy a gun in Colorado, yes or no? Or Virginia? It says you can't buy a semi-automatic. Can you buy a revolver? I'm just waiting to see if anybody can tell me. I'll move on for the time being, but I'm very curious to know about this. Now, Joe CBS says that the Supreme Court will have a final word on those state laws. So let's see. As of August 1, no semis, revolvers still okay, some shotguns. Okay, again, I find myself in a situation where I am arguing on a side that I don't want to be on. But nevertheless, with that said, just with respect to Tim's argument, you still can buy a gun in any state in the union. You may not be able to buy the kind of gun you want. I think the whole thing is ridiculous. Of course, I believe you should be able to own semi-automatic weapons and automatic weapons. But the fact of the matter is that you can still purchase a personal firearm in any state in the union. So for him to say that the Second Amendment has been completely blown away, doesn't protect the right to bear arms, he says because the state can take away still take your guns away. I'm not sure if they can take away the guns of a law-abiding citizen, but in any event, he's not correct in this position of his. He's absolutely correct that there are huge attempts to infringe upon our right to do this, but nevertheless, don't forget the waiting periods and the no transfer limits and the background checks. All of this I get, but the fact of the matter is you can still buy a gun to defend yourself in all 50 states of the nation. I'm just going after Tim's arguments. That's all. When you get to the point where you say the Constitution is useless, then that's when I get on my constitutional armor and start pushing back. Habeas corpus doesn't exist because Lincoln suspended it, and we all praise him as the greatest POTUS to ever live. Does habeas corpus exist today, Tim? Does the laws of state habeas corpus exist today? Because in my view, I believe it does. And what that's telling me is that the greatest president who ever lived had to suspend the right of habeas corpus to win the war because of the amount of spying was going on and all the rest of this stuff. And when it was finished, those rights were returned to the people. Lincoln was agonizing over these things. It killed him before the assassin bullet. You look at Lincoln in 1863 and 1865, he's aged 20 years. So he had to make a decision. Dave Big Boutte says, doesn't the Constitution say habeas corpus can be suspended during war and civil unrest? It was suspended temporarily. I think what's actually happening is that it makes the argument in suspend, not eliminate. Well, it was suspended for the duration of the Civil War, and then it was reinstituted. So what's the argument? This is the greatest crisis in the history of the country. This is the existential crisis of the country. Lincoln had one mission. And people talk about Lincoln's hypocrisy. Lincoln said, oh, we're going to free some slaves, we're not going to free other slaves, and we're going to imprison some journalists because they're promoting. Lincoln had one mission. It was very clear to him. And he said, my entire mission is to save the Union. He said pretty much verbatim, if I could save the Union by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. If I could save the Union by keeping all the slaves in bondage, I would do it. And if I could save the Union by freeing some slaves and not freeing others, I would do that also. So the fact that we have a flag, a common flag, and we all get up and salute the same flag as a result of Abraham frickin' Lincoln, who took all of this on his back. He had his Republicans were on him from the rear. The Democrats he didn't have much Democratic opposition because the Democrats had left and become the Confederacy. But he had to fight that war and win that war. He had to do all of these other things. There's never been so much weight on one man's shoulders. What Lincoln had to do was orders of magnitude more difficult than what Washington had to do in terms of moral decision-making. And when I hear that Lincoln was this tyrant and this traitor, it makes me insane. It makes me absolutely insane. He was walking a fine line. And by the way, that movie of Steven Spielberg's is a superb movie. I thought, oh God, super liberals going to paint the Republicans as this, but no, it shows exactly how Lincoln was struggling with this. And since the movie is basically about the passage of the 13th Amendment, there's a tremendous scene in there where Lincoln said, yes, I was able to free some of the slaves because I considered them contraband of war, and I did it as commander-in-chief, not as the president of the United States. Lincoln then says that's very, very, very shaky legal ground, which is why we need this amendment. This amendment puts the issue to bed. It's over after this amendment. So if the guy basically freed some slaves and kept some slaves in bondage in order to keep, the main reason for the Emancipation Proclamation was to keep Great Britain from coming in on the side of the Confederacy in 1863. So he's got, not only does he have his own civil war to deal with, not only does he have his own conscience to deal with, not only does he have to worry about whether he's doing the right thing or the wrong thing, he also has to understand that the reason that we won the revolution was because the French Navy essentially blockaded the British from coming into America, and he was looking at the Civil War 90 years later and saying, if Great Britain comes in on the side of the South in order to protect their textile uses, the anti-slavery sentiment in Britain was very, very high. And so when Lincoln freed the slaves in the South, that was meant for, primarily meant for the British people to pressure their government to not get involved with this on the side of the Confederacy. They were going to come in on the side of the Confederacy. It was in Great Britain's interest to have the United States broken up into two pieces. It was an enormously great idea from Britain's point of view. We don't have to deal with this one massive nation now that's starting to really challenge us. Let's have a northern United States, southern United States. Britain was highly motivated to come in on the side of the South. That might have turned the tide of the war. But basically, Lincoln had to navigate this. He had to navigate all of this stuff. And for people to just dump on him like, you should have done this or you should have done that, it's the worst form of Monday morning quarterbacking I've ever seen. He kept the Union together, and more importantly than that, when it was over, all of the freedoms that he had suspended or leaned against were returned. There's nothing after the Civil War that Lincoln did that stayed, because he did not intend them. He was not a tyrant. It was not a power grab. It was necessity in the direst of extremities, I should say. And who else could have navigated this? I don't. And by the way, all of this stuff that happened after the Civil War, all of the Jim Crow and the Ku Klux Klan and the slavery and the lynchings and all of that, none of that would have happened if Abraham Lincoln hadn't been assassinated. All of that was done by Andrew Johnson, who was, if I remember correctly, an actual Democrat, but was a puppet of the Jacobins who wanted to punish the South and crush them. Lincoln wanted them, he said, let them up easy. But no, he was assassinated by a Southern activist, Southern Democrat, and if John Wilkes Booth hadn't fired that pistol, then the South would have been an entirely different place. Andrew Johnson on Lincoln's second inaugural was so drunk when he gave his acceptance speech that Lincoln told his guards to basically put him in a room someplace and lock him up. We don't want him here for the party. He's Andrew Johnson, the president who followed Lincoln and preceded Lincoln were the two worst presidents in the history of the United States. James Buchanan and Andrew Johnson were absolute monsters. One of them handed Lincoln the mess, and the other one made a mess out of what Lincoln had set up. Lincoln didn't want Jefferson Davis caught. He said, look, if he were to just accidentally step out of the country while I wasn't looking, that wouldn't bother me none. What do you compare him to? Is he to be compared with Jesus? I mean, he's a man who's got to deal with other men, and he's not only got to deal with them morally, he has to find a way to make these things happen. That's why that Lincoln movie is so great, and why Daniel Day-Lewis's performance in that, I think, is probably the greatest performance in history. You know, and finally, when Lincoln is just so fed up, he needs a couple of votes to get this 13th Amendment and have it be over. And he stands up and he says, I am the President of the United States, clothed in immense power. You will find me those votes. You will go out there and get me those votes. Because that solved the issue. It solved all of it. He was an astonishingly moral man who suffered more intensely than any other figure in history I could think of, with the exception of Jesus Christ. He was miraculous. But no, and then what Razorfist said, no, Lincoln started the Civil War because of tariffs or some bullshit like that, as if there hadn't been 13 tariff arguments or government equivalent of government shutdowns prior to Lincoln. No. No, 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 no. You want to blame the destruction of the Constitution, you can leave Abraham Lincoln out of this. The Constitution had to bend it so he wouldn't break it, and then everything that he did to bend the Constitution was put back when he was finished. If you want to start looking at people who broke the Constitution, you can start with Woodrow Wilson, you can work your way up to FDR, and then Lyndon Johnson, and then Barack Obama. Those are the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Habeas corpus doesn't exist because Lincoln suspended it. Well, he unsuspended it. And we all praise him as the greatest protest ever to live. We've had martial law in the streets of America. We had martial law in the streets of Los Angeles. We don't have martial law now. It was imposed. It was then unimposed. It's imposed during crises because that's how people behave. That's how people behave in a panic. It's necessary. And it's not a power grab if it goes away. So, fourth, he goes on saying, Tim Pool says, the Fourth Amendment doesn't exist because police scanners, NSA, and tech companies mass harvesting our data, etc. So the Fourth Amendment says we have the right to be secure in our papers and privacy and all of this stuff. My response to this would be, if Tim's point is that the Fourth Amendment doesn't exist is because people have access to our data, my response to Tim would be, as a defender of the Constitution, well, Tim, you're the one who gave them access to your data. You're the one that signs the Apple agreement. You're the ones that that agrees to all of these 20-page things like this. You could say, well, the banks are monitoring your information. Yes, that's true, but you could go into a bank with a handwritten check and do your banking that way. You don't have to do your banking online. You don't have to have an iPhone. You don't have to have any of those things. That's not the government's failure. That's your failure. And my failure. Everybody's failure. I don't get to complain about people harvesting my data when I have a device in my pocket that lets me ask artificial intelligence what the surface temperature of a planet orbiting 18 AU away from a 61 Cygni double star is. I gave up that freedom or that protection, and I gave it up willingly, and I gave it up knowingly. I didn't like it. It doesn't make me happy. If you want to talk about laws to prevent this from happening, well, then I'm with you 100%. If you want to break up the big tech companies, then I am not only with you 100%, I will stand either in front of you or behind you with a pitchfork and a torch, and march with you on this abuse of power on the part of the companies. But as far as the Fourth Amendment goes, Facebook didn't kick down your door and rifle your papers, Tim. I'm sorry to put it so plainly, but that's the way it is. You're the one who decided to have the convenience of a digital life. You made that decision. Google didn't come in and crack your safe. So, we had thought in 1984, in the novel 1984, the big reveal is that there's a camera in the house that the government has access to, that the government is watching you through your TV set. That was the shocking reveal when you revealed that the television set that was giving you information was also watching you. How many cameras do you have in your house now? I'm looking around here and I'm trying to see how many cameras I have. I have the webcam. I've got my iPhone here. I've got a number of other computers that are either on standby or whatever. Certainly when everything's up and firing here, there's no less than 6 or 7 cameras in this studio. I know they're here. And I know that they're here because I bought them here I bought them and brought them here and plugged them in. And I'm aware of what that means. I'm aware that this iPhone that's sitting there that appears to be turned off could be listening to me right now. I get all of it. It was a conscious decision I made as to whether or not I was willing to risk those protections in order to participate in the modern world. And I decided yes. And the reason I decided yes was because I reasoned, and I don't think this was just justification on my part, I reasoned that they're not particularly interested in what Bill Whittle is doing. They're interested in what all of us are doing. I came to that realization quite a while ago that this harvesting of data is not so they can put me or trap me. It's so that they can predict what we are all going to do, which is much more dangerous. But again, if you were to say to the founders, or the framers, I should say, well, we have cameras in our houses and people are listening to everything we say and our movements are being tracked, their response would be, did they post a guard on every single American to record your... No, I did this on my own. I carry the tracking. Here's my tracking device right here. See, I use this tracking device all the time. This is the tracking device that the government uses to track me with, and I interface with this tracking device all the time. And I'm going to interface with it right now just because I need to for 1 second. You see? So, I hope that helped, Marusha. Eric Blake. Tonight, the case of the congressional chess match. So, Bill, when we last left the Save America Act, Trump had arranged for it to be attached to a national security spending package so as to avoid the filibuster issues Thunes is apparently incapable of working through. Now, as you've hopefully heard, Trump has actually followed through on his pledge to sign no bills passed by Congress until the Save America Act is similarly on his desk, be it attached to a spending bill or not. Specifically, a bipartisan legislation allegedly to slash housing regulations and thereby provide relief for the affordability issue has been put to the side by the Don, not vetoed, mind you, he's no idiot. Constitutionally, after X days, an unsigned, unvetoed bill becomes law by default. What's the pocket veto then? Is it just holding on for that length of time? Trump simply proving a point. It's a waiting game now. With all this, how do you see it turning out? Will the Senate leadership blink and maybe accept the attachment plan? P.S. How's your blood pressure? It was better before I started with this tonight. Don Rumsfeld got roasted for saying you go to war with the army you have, and that was one of the most sensible things that any politician has ever uttered, and so was the whole business about known knowns and known unknowns. They mocked him for that too because they're too stupid to understand fairly simple, complex level issues. I'm at the point now where if the bill is signed into law, I don't care how it gets there. You can't. There's nothing more useless than a bill that doesn't pass, than an amazing bill that doesn't pass, or an amazing candidate that doesn't get elected. This is the reality of life that people who have watched ourselves be compromised into real trouble say, no, it's the compromise that's the problem. You've got to hold the line on this. You can't compromise on these things. And my response to that is, if not compromising means you lose, and compromising means you get 80% or 90% of what you want, then what that reduces itself to, whether you like it or not, you have a decision to make between 80% of what you want or 0% of what you want. I don't see any reasonable defense of the 0%, other than the more you keep doing this, the more it's going to happen. Yes, but if the legislation that's under discussion is legislation designed to get you back closer to a place where you don't have to compromise, then you have to compromise so that you don't have to compromise in the future. I don't know how else to put it. I think politics is everybody has always known, in every country and every culture, everybody knows politics is horrible. It's messy, it's terrible, it's run by the worst people. As a general rule, good people are discouraged from it. Scott Ott was elected to the Allentown, I think it was the Allentown City Council, don't quote me that, it might have been the county. But he was at a legislative meeting as an elected official, and everybody was very excited because some amount of money, like $1.2 million or something, had been earmarked for Allentown in order to either buy something or improve on something that, in the case of Allentown, didn't need improvement, didn't need improvement. So basically everybody on the town or county council, whatever it was that Scott was a member of, were just slapping high fives and saying, hey, we're getting $1,200,000. And Scott said, we don't need this money for this. We can't spend it on some of the other things we need, and we don't need it for this. We shouldn't take it. What? We shouldn't take it. We don't need it. It's not, it's just, they couldn't process it. And I don't know if I can blow Scott's horn without blowing my own a little bit, but as I mentioned several times on this show, 3 times my bank offered me large loans that they said clearly do not need to be repaid because of COVID. And I turned all 3 of them down because COVID was not affecting my business, directly anyway. In fact, if anything, it was probably helping my business. I just turned it down, and I needed it. That's why Scott got kicked out of that's why Scott didn't win the re-election. Virtue is it's easy to be virtuous when the cause is right but abstract. It's much harder to be virtuous when being virtuous is money that doesn't go to your pocket. I realized that I must have some fundamental level of virtue when I was really, I wasn't in my absolute starving poverty years, but I was tight on money, and I had like $120 and went down to, I think it was Publix when I was living in Miami, and I came back home with like $120 worth of groceries. I was putting them away, and I checked my wallet, and I still had the $120 in there, and I realized I'd gotten into a conversation with the cashier, and we were talking about stuff, and she was bagging the stuff, and I walked out of there without realizing that I'd forgotten to pay, and she let me out of there without realizing that I'd forgotten to pay. So I'm usually a night person, so I went back there, and it was probably about 9:30. Publix closed at 9, and I just went there, and it was locked. Doors were locked. I went to return the money, and the doors were locked. And that would have been a good enough excuse for a lot of people, but I just kept banging on the doors, and some guy way in the back of the things said, we're closed. I said, I know, come here. Finally, the guy came open. I said, hey, I was just here, 45 minutes ago or whatever, and I was talking with the cashier, and I bought $120 worth of groceries, and I just didn't hand him the money, and he forgot to ask me for it, and I went home, and I guess he closed up. He says, that's what happened. We were trying to figure out what happened to that guy's account. I said, yeah, well, I hope he didn't get any trouble over it, It was just, we were both talking about something, we were so both into it and so both excited, and of course the time of it was just, okay, it was a great thing, and off we went. those are the kind of people who you need to have a high trust society. And importing people that don't have that ethical code is the surest way to destroy this country, not by quibbling about whether or not Abraham Lincoln should have suspended habeas corpus in order to win the Civil War. So I just want the bill signed. Ray Juarez, and then Roadrunner is got one in. That's good. Always good to see my buddy Roadrunner here. Ray Juarez. Hey, Bill, it's well since I watched TSL. Hope you're doing well. Thank you. Doing much better than I was a couple weeks ago. Question, are neglected water features a sign of bigger problems within a city? Trump has put in work orders to get a ton of fountains running again around D.C. I've attached a 40-minute video of a guy doing a tour of them. One that is scheduled for repair is the John Paul Jones Memorial and several others, big and small. Have a great night, and I hope the work on the colonies is going well. It is going well. Thank you very much, Ray. And here's a video that I'll look at later. Yes, if you have a capital city of a country that is not in massive decline, then your fountains should be working. They put them in there when the republic was growing, and they put them in there to beautify the city, and they put them in there to show that we have some additional wealth, that we have more money than which we're not in debt and we're not broke. So these fountains were put in place. And then if you're telling me that we no longer have the money to maintain the fountains, let alone build them or build new ones, then a fountain that doesn't have water in it is a sign of decline. And I don't buy this decline. I don't buy managed decline. I don't buy unmanaged decline. I don't believe the United States ever has to decline. I think decline is a choice. I think decline is an absolute choice. And decline and fountains that don't have water in them are a sign of decline. And Donald Trump understands this. He's a property manager. He knows that if he drives past a hotel, and the hotel is supposed to have a nice fountain out front and a nicely mown yard with a little flower garden, and he drives up to the hotel and there's no water in the fountain, and the grass is kind of shabby and there's no flowers in the flower bed, then this hotel is dying. So yes, 100%, we need to do this, and the cost is trivial. It's microscopic. It's beyond microscopic. It's a nanometer mistake. Or expense, I should say. When in the grand scheme of things, what this country spends on a daily basis fixing the fountains is less than half a second's worth of the total budget for the day. You know, when you throw in all the Medicare and Medicaid and all the rest of this stuff, fountains are there to show abundance. Roadrunner said, didn't Congress pass a law mandating low-flow fountains? A low-flow fountain is a contradiction. A fountain of water is a sign to everybody that we live in a world of abundance. This is why when people come over from Africa, they can't believe when they take baths in it, or they drink out of it. It's like, you've got so much water that you can afford to just splash it in the air? Yeah. Do you lose some to evaporation? Yes. I would be curious to know, just not for the expense argument, because frankly, unless you live in California, or a place where really water is genuinely scarce, I'm not too much interested in it. But I would be interested just for the sake of it, just so I had the knowledge. Let's say you had a big high fountain. Well, let's go right to the main extreme, why don't we? If you've ever seen the water fountain show at the Bellagio in Las Vegas, it's spectacular, and they run it, I don't know if it's once an hour or twice an hour, but it's spectacular. And there's a big pool out there, and the super high pressure water thing, and enormous amounts of water go up. Now in the summertime in Las Vegas, it's never below 100 degrees. It's usually around 112, 115, something like that. So, and the air is exceedingly dry. All of this means maximum evaporation. The hotter it is, the more water evaporates, and the lower humidity, the more room there is for water vapor in the air. And I would like to know if you start the day and the total volume in that pool is 100%. If you don't pump any water in during the course of the day, what percentage of that 100% is lost to evaporation? I haven't got the faintest idea. It might be 700%, but if I had to guess, I'd say it'd be probably around 30, 40%, something like that, maybe less. So the water isn't the problem. The problem is you just have to fix the pumps. You just have to fix the pumps. Low flow toilets are a waste of time and convenience. Convenience is why we work. This is why we do what we do. I like a convenient flow. Low flow toilets have to be flushed 3 times. Tranquility Base, hey buddy, how are you? It's so good to see you. Man, I owe you so many phone calls, it's unbelievable. I'm sorry about that. Just been really busy. Tranquility Base says, go to Rome, Italy, and look at the water they use without a second thought. There are public drinking fountains which run 24/7, and they are not low flow. Yes. Yes. And Washington is on the East Coast. There's plenty of water there. Yes, these fountains should be overflowing. They should be just, plus they're beautiful. Okay, Bellagio adds 12 million gallons a year to a 22 million gallon total. Does that scale to a daily basis? Would they add 12 gallons? Oh, they would add 12 gallons a year to a 22 gallon total. That's a year. So it's a little over half is lost to evaporation in a year, not in a day. They have to pump in 1 million gallons a month. Okay. They lose 50% a year. 32,900 gallons a day. Well, it works. It makes it look like an amazingly opulent place, and I just love it. So, yes, I think all of our statues need to be not torn down. The ones that have been torn down need to be restored. They need to be replaced and restored back to the original people. They need to be anybody who's defacing a statue needs to face felony charges, and they need to be enforced. And our problem is nobody's enforcing the law. That's entirely the problem, is nobody's enforcing the law. Okay, Roadrunner, I think this will be the last one for the night. I'm feeling a little voicey. And I'm a little, getting a little hungry too. Some other things I need to do tonight, but you get the idea. I see in the news President Trump has come to an agreement with the Islamic theocracy in Iran, a government that is widely known to have blatantly ignored every agreement they have ever made. What I don't see in the news or even on the internet is anything about the actual Iranian citizens that were protesting the Islamic government. Have they been completely forgotten? Are we going to be stuck with a rabid Islamic Iran for another 50 years? Update. Cynical Publius is postulating that perhaps President Trump is playing 5D chess again, that he made the agreement knowing that the Islamic government would violate it almost immediately, thereby proving to the world he has no choice but to once again bomb the crap out of them. Unfortunately, I'm not so sure. My thoughts are that the president believes that his experience with making deals with corrupt New York City politicians and corrupt New York City unions gives him the experience with dealing with the Islamic regime. What are your thoughts? Off topic, not a question, just an interesting fact. SpaceX has now launched more satellites than everyone else in history. Isn't it a great time to be alive? That's a statement. All right, so look, I don't know if I buy the 5D chess argument, but I know this. If we say that this conflict is over and there is still an Islamic regime in Iran, then we have failed strategically and we have failed morally. And I do not for the life of me know why we are negotiating with these people. Now, guys like Eric say, oh, don't worry, you're going to see. And even here in the question is the 5D chess argument where Trump needs them to turn down the deal so that he can go finish the job. And I'm saying, why does he need permission to finish the job? Why did he wait 4 months to finish the job? Why don't just finish the job? When they said that the declared goal of the conflict, of the war, was to deprive Iran of nuclear weapons, I said, this is not a goal. This is a kick in the can down the road. Donald Trump, I get the feeling that both Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio would agree with what I'm about to say. I don't know this. I just think that they would. When he announced once the conflict was underway, once the kinetic war had started, Donald Trump should have come out and said, we are now at war with the government of Iran. I think he should have gotten a War Powers Act. I think he would have gotten it. But he should have simply said this. He should have said, this war is with the Islamic regime that has raided, taken over, and raped the country of Iran, which is a Persian culture. They have kidnapped it and held it hostage since 1979. We are not starting a war with Iran. Iran has been at war with the United States since 1979, and anybody with eyes can see it. They've not just been at war with the United States since 1979, they've been at war with the world since 1979. And so we are now going to put an end to this criminal outlaw regime that has murdered 300,000 of its own people just earlier this year. And our terms are very simple. Our terms are unconditional surrender of the Islamic regime of Iran. And we will continue to escalate this kinetic war at our leisure and at our determination, and we will decide when and where we strike, but we will continue to strike until the Islamic regime that has hijacked this country has issued us a statement saying we surrender unconditionally. And until that point, we will continue to turn up the heat. And I would have also said, for the benefit of Americans, by the way, Iran is not a toothless tiger. Iran is a serious adversary on the world stage. They have a tremendous missile arsenal. We are going to war with a country that is heavily armed. We are not worried about whether or not we will win this war. We know we're going to win this war. But I am telling the American people right now, as of tonight, you cannot go to war on this scale and expect to come out of this with no losses. We want to come out of it with no losses. We plan to come out of it with no losses, but that is not how the world works. We're going to lose men and women on the ground. We're going to lose air crews. We're going to lose airplanes, and we may have to lose ships. And if we lose ships, then we lose ships. I don't know how many, let's say we have 120. We have 120 Arleigh Burke destroyers in the U.S. Navy right now, and we may lose 5 of them, or we may lose 10 of them if we have to. We may lose an aircraft carrier during the course of this war. Just because we have these weapons and this much power doesn't mean that the enemy doesn't get a vote. This is a war. And if we're not prepared to take losses in a war, then we're not going to war. But we have to do this. We have to put an end to this. We're tired of it. We're sick of it. And the entire world is tired of it. We are going to go in there and we are going to get unconditional surrender from the Islamic regime. And if they sink the USS Abraham Lincoln while we do it, then we're just going to have to fall back on the other 10 aircraft carriers that we have. Needless to say, we're not planning on putting our assets in that position. Needless to say, we're not planning on losing men or losing aircraft. But this is the reality of life on Earth. And if you don't like it, and if you want to compare warfare to some ideal that doesn't exist in the world, then I don't have time for you. I do not have time for you. We're going to go in there. Well, what if Iran closes the Straits of Hormuz? Well, then we will push the goddamn straits open. That's what's going to happen. Of course they're going to try and close the Straits of Hormuz. We have 75 Arleigh Burkes? Okay. I've been on an Arleigh Burke, and I've met the people on an Arleigh Burke, and I would hate to think that any of them got hurt, let alone killed, but nevertheless, 75 Arleigh Burke destroyers means we can afford to force the strait if we have to. Because if the threats to the Arleigh Burkes are coming from mines, we have minesweepers. We have submarines with exquisitely sensitive sonar that can locate the position of these mines, and we can clear the mines. And if it turns out that our minesweepers or our destroyers come under surface-to-surface missile attack from land-based batteries on Iranian shores, then those batteries are going to be destroyed as they send them in. And if they get through our defenses, which I think is unlikely, but if they do, then we're going to take our losses like men and women, and we are going to continue this battle until we get unconditional surrender, and then we are going to make the government of Iran pay us back for our losses in reparations as a result of what we had to do in order to get rid of that regime. And the Iranian people are going to greet us as liberators because they feel the same way we do, and this is not some piece of rogue intelligence. It's clear that the Islamic regime is finished with the people of Iran, and they just want to join the community of nations. Any other questions? No, I didn't think so. That will do it for this press conference. We will keep you updated on a daily basis. The defense secretary has a few words, and that will do it for me. And then I just walk off the stage, and that's it. Bam, goodbye, good night. That's it. Yes, Quibo says use robot drones. I completely agree. The most recent right angle was talking about using drones, and I am in. Drones are fantastic. I love drones. They're great. Anytime we can send a drone in and not risk a person, that's fine. But what I argued in the most recent right angle is there has to be a human in the loop if you are talking about using drones to kill people. I got an email from a man whose son I had a son who served 2 years in the Marines as a rifleman before separating. He then went to Ukraine, served 7 months, and was returning from a mission when he was killed by an FPV drone while crossing a field. I don't know if the pilot of that drone will survive the war or not, but if he does, he should live with the knowledge of the life he took. In all fairness, had my son survived, he would have done the same. Yes. The reason we brought that subject up is because Steve Green said that Ukraine is setting drones loose on automatic kill orders. If it moves, kill it. And I said, this is not a place we want to go. By all means, use drones to save American lives. Absolutely, yes. But somebody's got to look at that person, and somebody's got to pull that trigger. And when I was at CENTCOM, as I described in that episode, when I went to CENTCOM, I saw the total number of people that were involved with killing these terrorists. And these terrorists, by the way, needed killing. These guys were saying the worst part of this job is not giving orders to launch a Hellfire missile off a Predator drone. The worst part of this job is the number of times that we have to sit there in orbit over a village and watch these women being gang raped by these Islamicists and not have any weapons that we can deploy against them. That's the part that we can't handle. That's when we start losing our stuff in terms of, breaking down and crying and all the rest of it. Because they're decent people. We're decent people. And somebody needs to bear the weight of killing somebody else. If you take that out of war, then you violate Robert E. Lee's dictum. Robert E. Lee said, it is good that war, it is well, I suppose he said, it is well that war is so horrible, or else we would get too attached to it. Terrible. It is good that war is so terrible, else we would get too attached to it, something like that. Or become too fond of it, something very much like that. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. It should have been unconditional surrender from the get-go. I don't know. I just don't get it. I don't get it at all. And I don't see how the Iranians can close the Straits of Hormuz at their leisure against the United States Navy. Not the United States Navy that I know. And I suspect that guys like Pete Hegseth are saying I suspect that what's happening is I suspect that if I had to guess, the variables broke down this way. We could force the strait, but we would lose men, and we might lose ships. And I think Trump decided, no, I don't think I want to go to the American people with the loss of a destroyer, let alone an aircraft carrier. And my position would be, was it John Paul Jones or was it Stephen Decatur? Anybody who doesn't want to be on this ship, get off of it now, because I intend to sail into harm's way. I like to think that Trump is playing, that the 5D trust Trump is playing is the selective opening and closing of. Ernest Evans said that, but he was quoting somebody else. So he wasn't the first person to say "in harm's way." Quibo, I'm making AI videos on a daily basis, but they've all been rendering tests for the rover. The rover is a hero asset. I put so many sensors and decals on the rover, but they've got to be consistent. And I've been locking them down, but when you see the rover, I'd like to have it by Monday. I can't guarantee I will. If I don't have it by Monday, I won't do the Monday show. I'll do it the following Monday. I told you I'd do Stratosphere Studios primarily with the colonies, and I have spent so much time on this rover that the next thing I'm going to produce, the next short I'm going to produce, is going to be a commercial for the Conestoga rover, the Conestoga rover, which I've already written the copy for. So there we go. All right, I think it's going to do it for me tonight, gang. It's good to be back. I don't think anybody had any stuttering tonight, not with our frickin' 858 or 893 megabytes per second upload. So I think our streaming problems with at least with YouTube and hiccups and things like that, I think those problems have gone away forever. So that's cool. You will not believe the quality of the work that's coming out of these test renderings on the colonies. You won't believe it. They're phenomenal. So, all right. Yeah, I think it's time for me to go. All right, guys. Well, thanks very much for joining us. Thanks especially to the members at BillWhittle.com for making all this possible. And I can show you a teaser of Connie. Yeah. I can, if you're willing to see a work in progress that is using a scratch audio track and just some general renderings, I can play it for you now. But I don't want to hear anything about, well, this sensor moved, or I don't think the narration is quite right. It is a work in progress. If you want to see it, you can see it on Twitch. So hang on a second. YouTube here. I don't want this recorded. So if you're watching us on YouTube and you're able to go over here, here's the link. And if you're watching this after it's over, then I'm afraid you missed your chance. But there's 74 people watching live on YouTube right now. Here's the link for Twitch. I'm going to shut down the YouTube stream now. And if you want to go and see a version 0 of the Connie commercial, I can show you that now. I think, yes, I did one. This is why I had practical nervous breakdown on Monday night 2 weekends ago, because I was rushing to get this thing done, and then I opened up the streaming service and the microphone wasn't working. So this is not a finished product. You're going to see a lot of things in there that are going to be much improved, but I can give you an idea of it. Okay, so YouTube, thanks for joining us. There's that link for under Bill Whittle channel to, if you want to just slip over to Twitch TV, I'll show you this. And if not, I'll have it ready either by this coming Monday or the Monday after that. Okay, thanks everybody for joining us. It's great to see everyone as usual. And until then, I will see you. We'll plan on next Thursday for the Stratosphere Lounge. If I can get it done before then, we'll do a Monday studio, and if not, it'll be the following Monday. Okay, so thanks very much for joining us, YouTube, and we will click you on